forgetting stuff right now.
Hey, the time is 7:01 and call the regular meeting of the Nome Common Council for Monday, May 9th, 2022 to order.
Here.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Here.
Representative Ebel.
And is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Councilmember Mark Johnson, roll call, please.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us on to communications. The first item we have is notice of spring cleanup going on the 31st through the 3rd. Out on a Saturday at a couple of locations. And Paul Hall, if you have the like, white goods, refrigerators and washing machines and that type of stuff, put them to the curb and call City Hall to make sure that you're on the list.
That'll include the normal trash, I mean, not just white goods or?
Oh, yeah. I mean, anything that wouldn't normally go in your. There's also an e-waste event going on, so if you got old TVs, computers, and the like, there's a drop-off location that Coeric has, and that is over in the parking lot between Coeric and the Methodist Church on Cephala Drive. They'll be accepting things on Friday, June 3rd and Saturday the 4th from 10 until 4. There's a small charge for that, but it's free to residents. So small charge for commercial and free to residents. Is our budget calendar. On the 16th, we'll be holding an additional work session on city budgets. Citizens' comments. Are there members of the public to address the council this evening? Being done, move on to new business. The first item is a memorandum from the city attorney having to do with housing incentive ordinances. Those are items B, C, and D on our agenda. And something that the city manager has been working with Councilmember Henderson on to look at ways that we can incentivize folks to build rental properties or rehabilitate properties for to meet the housing shortage in our community. Council will plan to have a work session on these ordinances. Has been scheduled for Tuesday, May 17th at 5:30. Move us on then to ordinance 220501. Mr. Clerk, would you read this by title?
O-220501, an ordinance of the Nome City Council, Nome, Alaska, amending the Nome Code of Ordinances, section 17.20.020 to provide for a temporary exemption from property tax for deteriorated structures located in a designated area of Nome that are being substantially rehabilitated, renovated, and replaced.
Thank you. Is there a motion to place this ordinance into second reading, public hearing, and final passage at the next meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Councilmember Mark Johnson. Any discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't, I guess, I didn't get a chance to review this until the weekend with the packet with everybody else. And I do have, there's a lot of differences in the attorney's memorandum dated April 26th. And so unfortunately, I didn't have an opportunity to discuss this memo with him or with Glenn prior to this meeting. So do have, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but I do have a number of concerns about this particular ordinance as the way it was drafted. And I've got just a number of things. I'll just run through those if that's okay with you.
Please.
The first one, I'm looking at the memorandum. The memorandum that the attorney created covers both incentives, both for the dilapidated structures and the ones for the new economic development. And I will just start on page 43 of the packet. It talks about the dilapidated property exemption. And under the second paragraph, it says the exact area to be described. The building must have been previously identified on a list of dilapidated buildings maintained by the city. My concerns is that the way that this memorandum reads is that the exemption would only apply to properties that the city has already designated as dilapidated, which means they would have to be on a list prior to this exemption being approved. And I have concerns about that. And so I don't know what his thought process was, and I don't see him on the screen. So it says the council could change its qualification. So I would just like to remove this requirement or this recommended requirement that the particular property must be on some type of a dilapidated list already by the city. It talks about the process to go through in terms of qualifying for it. It talks about the exemption under this particular ordinance for rehabilitated properties only lasting up to 10 years. I believe the attorney did indicate that previously, that is basically restricted by in Title 29, that it can only be exempt for a maximum period of 10 years, but the full value of that property can be considered tax exempt. I have concerns on the second page, on page 44, the third paragraph. It talks, the last sentence, the council may want to consider whether houses used as secondary residence for school district or city employees would also qualify. I'm not sure what he's referring to in that one. If he's talking about employees maybe owning a house somewhere else, or I'm not sure what exactly he's referencing there. So I guess we would need clarification on that. But other than that, I guess as it's written, those were my main concerns. The ordinance itself on page 46 indicates that under eligibility criteria under section 2AI, that the property is located in the deteriorated area of the city. He has previously indicated that an area or a particular geographic area within the city has to be identified as deteriorated. And I have indicated the entire city to everything within city limits to qualify so that we don't exclude unintentionally any properties that may qualify for this particular property exemption. So I've asked that, and I don't know if Glenn has any information on this, but I've asked that the entire city be designated as eligible for this particular ordinance. I've already talked about we should not require potential properties for this exemption to be on any kind of a pre-existing list of deteriorated structures by the city of Nome. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of my main concerns, both with the memo and the ordinance.
We will have the attorney present for the work session. Address those specific concerns, his rationale, and help us in drafting any prior to considering it in second reading.
Request to John?
Please.
Do you have the attorney or staff write up something in layman's terms of what exactly, how this is going to work? Because the ordinance is so lawyer jargoned up, it's really hard to follow. And I think that if we don't have something easier to follow, that we're gonna maybe pass something that we don't intend to pass, or it just seems very confusing, a lot of the ways that it's written. So, and I know I didn't think we had discussed the dilapidated building thing. I'm kind of encouraged that the city would be considering increase incentives for people to fix up buildings or replace buildings instead of the fines for having those buildings. I think the incentive is good. I think we really need to put this more in layman terms as well, or maybe he'll be able to do that with explanation in the work session. Okay, thanks.
Councilmember.
I think Scott and Mark pretty well covered my issues.
Others in the room? If not, roll call please on passing this ordinance on to second reading, public hearing, and final passage.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcott.
EE.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Then companion to this is 220502. Mr. Clerk, by title, please.
O-220502, an ordinance amending Chapter 5.10 of the Nome Code of Ordinances to exempt projects which qualify for an economic development property tax exemption of a dilapidated property, tax exemption from permit fees.
Thank you. Is there a motion to move this on to second reading, public hearing, and final passage?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember
Second.
Henderson, Councilmember Johnson. I don't know if there's anything.
A couple of things. This particular ordinance was designed to apply to construction, and it appears that it's also going to apply to renovated structures as well. Maybe not necessarily ones that have been deteriorated, but repurposed, I guess, would be a discussion. It would be a better way to put it. Again, I have some questions for the city attorney on clarifying some of his memo relating to this under economic development property. I just wanted to make a comment on a couple of them. This particular ordinance is designed to, for somebody that wants to build new housing, new rental housing, and that qualifies as physical infrastructure. On page 44, the city attorney references something that only those that result in 6 new dwelling units or 6 new apartments could potentially qualify. That's obviously a concern to me. And he does indicate that council could select the lower higher number. But my original intent was to have, everything from 1 new rental unit and above to qualify for this particular tax exemption. Not only those that result in at least 6 new dwelling units. He indicates that there is a significant risk that a state assessor would frown on exemptions for something less than 6 units. Again, I don't understand why, but that would, hopefully he can shed some light on that, because my intent was that all new rentals that are created would be potentially qualified for this exemption program.
Are these things that are 220503? Okay.
Am I?
Yeah. Okay, so we were on 220502. If we don't have anything else on that one, can we have a vote on the real short one?
Oh, is this
The
the one for the
page.
fees?
Yeah.
Is this the one for the fees? I'm sorry, I totally, the only, must have been out of order on mine. The only request that I would have on that particular one is that we change the verbiage to also, I think it talks about permit fees, that we also include utility fees in there as well.
The reason why he included permit fees is because we've not had that discussion yet with the utilities, authority to see where they're willing to.
Understood.
And I think he put in there what the council could control.
Stating that I would like to have utility fees inserted in there.
Okay, roll call please on 220502, passing it on to second reading, public hearing.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Chopchak. Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
By title, please, Mr. Clerk.
0220503, an ordinance of the Nome, Alaska, amending the Nome Code of Ordinances, section 17.20.020, to provide for a partial temporary exemption from property tax for economic development property developed for multi-housing unit.
Thank you. Is there a motion to pass this one to second reading, public hearing, and final passage?
Motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Councilmember Jones. On to this, but is there anything else?
Yeah, so again, sorry about getting things out of order. I talked about obviously wanting, one or greater units to qualify for potential tax exemption under this particular ordinance or this particular program. Also, in the last paragraph on page 44, Brooks indicated that the renovation project must increase the assessed value of the existing structure by 50%. Again, I'm not sure where he got that, from. He indicates that we can obviously change that, so I'm guessing it's just a suggestion on his part. Obviously, this program is designed to expand the tax base, and I would recommend at final passage that we change this from 50% to increasing by 1%. So it does indicate here that on page 45, that the draft ordinance established a 15-year tax exemption. I want to remind everybody that there's no limit under this particular exemption program, so we can go longer than that if we feel that the economic incentive needs to be longer than that. I think he just put that as a suggestion in there.
Reason why it's not just 1%, because you have to have some reasonable number to grant. And that's what, when we were having this discussion with him, you have to say, okay, I've done some work, now I want a tax break because I did minor work. And in any of these incentives, no matter where you are, there usually is a percentage above that you've made a significant investment into the property to justify getting a significant tax break.
In my mind, the example he uses is simply converting a $1 million commercial structure to a $1 million residential structure will not expand the tax base. my argument is the whole idea behind this program is to create new rental units. And converting it to one or multiple residential spaces, more than likely you will get an increase in the assessed value. But what I don't want to do is set an arbitrary number that could potentially exclude any new residential units being built. And I want that threshold. Again, if you have residential structures before the project and you have one or more after the project, in my mind, definitely economic development for an issue that needs to be addressed. So that's my thought process. So whatever that magic number is, I just want to make sure we don't exclude any particular idea or project if it creates more rental units. It says 15 years, the exemption, again, that's just a suggestion. We could theoretically go longer if we desired to. Talks about this is the program that we cannot create an exemption for an amount that that includes the amount we contribute to the schools. I believe that the city of Nome is required to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Glenn, 2.65 mils?
2.65 mils.
So the idea being that if, say, for example, the mill rate is 12 mils, then if we have a property that is covered under this program, the maximum exemption that we could apply to a particular property or project is 9.35 mils. So that's the limitation. But again, different from the dilapidated property program, there's no term limit. We can go basically as many years as we want. And I saw in there, and again, this is probably another question for the attorney, that it says that both ordinances have an effective date of January 1, 2023. I would like to be able, if possible, to apply this program to any new rental units that are created in this particular tax year. And I don't know if we can apply that retroactively, but I don't want to exclude any potential projects that are underway or being considered. People wait until next year to apply for this program. Again, I don't know the appropriate mechanism to do that, but I want people to be able to, once they see this program, if they say, look, I'm going to get this started now, I want them to be able to apply and be qualified for it this year as opposed to waiting until next year.
Well, the attorney can clarify that. I think there are some.
There are some hoops that are gonna have to be, not, well, and this was what's discussed with Brooks, and it's with any place. Someone just can't start deciding to build without going through and getting approval to see if their property, what they propose doing, meets the requirements. And so anybody who may have started already, we don't want to create an impression they're going to get something when we find out it does not meet their doesn't meet the requirements. And I think that's why Brooks was starting this on a calendar year, because giving us time to set up, because the issue is who's going to review this, who is ultimately going to make the decision, is this going to be handled at a staff level? Is it going to be handled at the Common Council level? Is the Planning Commission going to be involved in this? The Planning Commission is involved in the abatement process, and when the council approves the abatement list, so that no one can say that one body is favoring somebody, just because. That this is, looked as being treated everybody fair and equitably. I mean, it's the same thing, you take a commercial structure, you turn around and renovate it into a residential structure. The value of that property is going to increase significantly because just the cost of plumbing it, and if there are any fire code requirements, it gets up there real quick.
No, I totally agree with you. I just don't want, again, I don't want to exclude any projects that may be looking at doing it, looking at getting it started. maybe applying for building permits and doing all these other things. This year, I want to make sure that if this program does get passed, that I don't want people to think, oh, because I started something in 2022 that completely complies with this program that we're going to do, that I can't do anything until next year. I don't want somebody to say, well, I'm going to wait to start until 2023. I don't want to create that disincentive to wait. So that was
Attorney will need to weigh into that. I think it here and our existing process that we're just going through on BOE and let's leave that for the attorney to,
We'll tee up the question.
he'll be ready.
Sure.
Thank you. If there's not anything else, a roll call, please.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That moves us to item E, resolution 220501. Mr. Clerk, by title, please.
R 220501, a resolution authorizing the city of Nome to apply for and participate in the USDOT PI grant program for funding the Port of Nome Arctic Port Reception Facility solid waste disposal phase.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 220501?
I'll make that motion.
Councilmember Mark Johnson, Councilmember Henderson. Or anything, Joy, that you should enlighten?
Sure. And this is the Arctic Port Reception Facility is encompassing all liquid and solid wastes, both domestic vessels as well as foreign vessels. This particular one is to initiate it's a large undertaking, so to initiate the port reception facility, we're moving forward with the incinerator phase, which incineration is required for regulated solid waste, which is galley waste off of foreign vessels. Primarily the cruise ships, but it can be the tankers as well. We had a Coast Guard certificate to do this about 20 years ago, maybe. But once the incinerator was no longer in place at the hospital, we were out of compliance, so we lost our certificate and we didn't do any more waste burning. The ships have been asking about it. We've been wanting to get back into that line because there's obviously no other facility on the Western Alaska, U.S. Arctic coast that can do that. So this is an application to the USDOT for the Port Infrastructure Development Program to fund 80% of that incinerator phase, which is complete design, procurement, shipping, construction, and obviously inspection and those things. The other 20% match, now they can fund up to 100%, but a minimum of up to 100% for rural communities and a minimum of 80. So we are looking to apply to the Denali Commission for the 20% balance in the event that they apply, that they only award for the 80%. We're hopeful for a federal award. This is something that is starting to become a high visibility item across the nation for the western and eastern Alaskan coasts, along with IMO's been pushing it pretty hard to try to get all of this galley waste to be properly disposed of in at least one or two facilities in the rural areas of the world. So we're trying to step up and make that, provide that service. Yeah, unless you guys have questions, that's kind of where we are right now. The incinerator is about a year to procure, to be built. So the awards for these federal grants for USDOT are looking like late summer, early fall. So if we were to be awarded, then we would move forward and get the incinerator ordered to maximize to minimize the amount of time it would take to get it on site for development. But most likely, we'd be looking at a 2024 construction season.
This actually is a revenue generator when all is done.
Yes, a significant revenue generator because of the handling requirements and the training and the PPE, the inspections. There's quite it's a good hefty rate put on this type of port service. And this 80% we have is 3.5 million, 7.35 out of a total $9.2 million project. And it would include purchasing land and constructing a building that the incinerator would be housed in at the landfill. It would require the port to purchase land from the city. City would like that.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Would this facility be standalone by itself just to handle the ships, or would we use some of our existing infrastructure? Like the liquid waste, do we use what we already have and add something to it to do it, or is this totally separate?
It will have the capacity to handle other wastes, as long as we don't violate our agreement with the Coast Guard and APHIS, which is the regulating branch, animal, plant, and health, those guys. Yes, and there will be opportunity to use it for domestic waste as well that needs to be incinerated. So there are other aspects of its purpose. Primarily, it's to accept the waste off the ships that we are unable to take now because we have no way of disposing of it. We were going to set up a couple of years ago shipping it out because there are waste disposal companies at the Anchorage airport because they have not only the ships, but they have the flights. And it was so cost prohibitive for the airlines to get trained up in the equipment, proper requirements and inspections. They want to do it. So this is our alternative. We need our own incinerator.
Would this, just for you, I don't know, but would this potentially extend the life of our existing landfill by having incinerator capacity? And I don't know if it can take large quantities or we could incinerate stuff that would ordinarily be buried.
Don't know, I don't have an answer for that. I'd have to look at them, we'd have to look at what we're trying to do.
This is,
You have to check with DEC and find out.
Now, I mean,
Please indicated it was possible, depending on what we could incinerate.
a big issue right now is vehicles, and, that's why we're also talking about recycling. Quirk is talking about it. I'd have to think about it. I mean, this is not a waste to energy project. I'll talk with John a little bit more. I was just thinking of a much smaller
rate the ships.
operation.
I just,
If there aren't any further discussion, we're ready for the vote. Please.
Councilmember Topcock.
EE.
Member Henderson.
yes.
Member Doug Johnson.
Yeah.
Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, and that brings us to resolution 220502. Mr. Floyd.
220502, a resolution authorizing the city of Nome to apply for and participate in the Denali Commission Transportation Program FY 2022 Waterfront Project Nomination for the Port of Nome Arctic Port Reception Facility Solid Waste Disposal Phase.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 2205, 0502? We already do that. What did I do? Councilmember Mark Johnson,
Second.
Councilmember Brown, thank you. This kind of goes along with the one just before, so we're probably ready for the vote. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
EE.
That brings us on to utility report. Mr. Morton is gone, but about the only thing that I would like to mention is that the utility is still actively seeking applicants for positions in all three divisions or a lineman, power plant mechanic, and motor operators. And so far, we've only had a bite on the water and sewer operators. We need a couple of them, but Robert Dixon has been hired as one of those, and still positions to be filled. So encourage you to either contact the utility or the Nome Job Service for applications. Mr. Mann,
Just got back into the office today, but we are going to be going around and updating the abatement list this month. Now, the snow has melted significantly. We're going to look at that, and it'll go in front of the planning commission and to you. The stove has been ordered, like everything else in the supply chain. It's 3 to 5 months out to get here and that's to replace the stove from a grant, from the DHSS grant, which is included in this budget. So that hopefully we'll get it here sometime this fall. The staff is still working on the mini, cleaning that up and addressing some issues down there. Other question I've been approached by several young people who are looking at being first-time home buyers, and they've asked me what incentives could be provided for them. I have not had a chance to talk with Brooks. I mean, obviously, we want to encourage our young people to want to invest in the community. A couple of them are looking at existing homes, but the price point is higher than they can afford. Or the second part is they would like to construct a new home. And then once again, that price point is a little difficult for them. So how to do this, I'm not exactly sure. Because even an older person could be a first-time home buyer, so it's not just the young people. One thing I've been wanting to discuss with you, and I've been hearing it's been going on amongst many of our tribal organizations, is to doing a strategic plan. Staff, an idea that what you think is important that we look at and draft a 3 to 5 year plan that would be reviewed on an annual basis to see where we are on accomplishing that. I would look at trying to find somebody to facilitate that and look at including the council and staff to talk about what they see as needs. May be different from what you see as needs as the elected body, but it would certainly allow hopefully a good conversation to move forward and plan for the future of the community, especially when it comes down to budgeting. You don't have any real objections to it. I'm going to start looking at it. I don't see it starting until this fall. most people's travels are done by that point. But I think it's something that, personally, I think you need. As a staff, as your staff, I would love to have it. I mean, I listen to what you ask at meetings and, try to incorporate that in somewhere in the process. But getting a consensus from the body, it helps. So may not say, okay, we seem to be listening to one council member over another council member. And then the last thing I have, and I got from council member Mark Johnson, is some ideas on potential sound improvement to our meetings. But it would help me to know if they're having a problem via the YouTube streaming, or are they listening to the problem with GCI that we broadcast over. We know we've had a lot of issues with the sound with GCI, but I don't know if we're having as much problems with the streaming, so that people can hear the meeting. But we also have to make sure we are enunciating and speaking, because we all tend to sometimes do this. And even if you had a mic in front of you, it still wouldn't pick you up. But it would help to know where the folks are having the problems. We do not have a franchise agreement with GCI where we can say, you need to do this, which in most communities I've worked in, they have a franchise agreement. So we are asking GCI to help us, and they have been very cooperative, in helping us. But I keep still hearing, I don't know whether it's the GCI connection or it's the streaming connection. So if someone mentions something to you, if you can ask them, well, where are you listening to the council? How are you viewing us? Are you viewing us through GCI, or are you viewing us over YouTube? That would certainly help, because we did make a significant investment as a community with what we have here. And as you all remember, we're getting criticized as an organization because we didn't have this stuff when we started into COVID. And we were able to piecemeal something together when you couldn't even get equipment at times. And I know John, the mayor, was a huge help, and Dana and GCSIT and Wade Harrison, there were a lot of people. Brian, as the coordinator of the magic here, I know a lot of time was spent with them. So it's just something to do. So if you can identify what it is they're viewing on, so we know where we need to target our problem, that would be a big help. Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you. On the citizens' comments, are there those in the audience?
Some questions.
Yeah, I thought you'd do it under your comments, but anyway.
Okay, I can wait. That's fine. We can do it. That's fine.
Well, I mean, under our comments, it's supposed to be just us commenting,
Okay,
not
okay,
not asking questions.
Whatever, go ahead.
I don't care.
Councilmember Henderson, you have
Okay.
some questions.
So, just for the record, I didn't bring up the whole sound system thing, so, I love your idea of a strategic plan. I think that would be really helpful, kind of a blueprint to shoot from. And one of my first priorities for a strategic plan is to develop a little bit of, I don't know if you call it depth or, we've had issues in the past with the city where a position will turn over, or somebody unexpectedly leaves, and then John steps in, doing 3 jobs at one time just to try to bridge the gap, because we don't have anybody to take that place. And that does create a lot of crisis and stress that we don't need. So I would request that the next budget work session that we have, that we look at in developing a assistant city manager position. I think over the years, several different people have brought this idea up, and it has never come to fruition. I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, and I won't get into all those details right now. But I think from a succession planning and development and so forth, and strength of our management team, I would encourage us to look at developing a assistant city council position. And one of those priorities, responsibilities would be to work with the council on research and various items that we've requested. And this would be along the same lines of a city assistant, a city council administrator that we talked about, I think, at the last meeting. So that's all I've got.
Well, I actually did put an assistant city manager. That was the economic development director.
Okay, so you just change the job title then from.
Well, I don't, you can call it, his or her duties are gonna be working very closely with the city manager and any future city manager because, it's just the way it works because people are gonna wanna talk to the city manager or there's the economic development director is going to be bringing people to talk to the city manager. And I think that would be the ideal position if you wanted to give that person additional responsibilities and potentially train him or her as a replacement for me in the future. But, you also find what's happening now, I will just say this in general, a lot of the assistant city managers don't want to be city managers after they're assistant city managers. And that's actually somewhat of a crisis in our industry, or profession, I should say, is that, you're a good group to work with, but there are a lot of that are not good.
Yeah, and that wasn't really designed to take over when you leave. It's designed to like while you're traveling, like so you can take time off. Or John wants to take time off. That we've got some stability and day-to-day operational management of the city, so that you guys can take time off because I know and this is to really take the stress off of you and Bryant and John and everybody, so that we have sort of a little bit more of a sharing of responsibilities, and hopefully, the assistant city manager position can deal with a lot of the city council issues so that you can focus on, much more important things. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Our Councilmember Mark
I'll
Johnson.
just echo on that. I like that idea. I think it's been brought up before. When I wasn't on council, I think maybe Josie Banky brought up that idea. And then when we were transitioning between city managers last time, when John was interim, I think John brought it up and I thought that was pretty receptive on the council of an idea. Because we understand that from the day-to-day operations, you can't get everything done in one day, or no city manager, shouldn't say you. A city manager has a difficult time doing that. So, we've already, I guess, everybody agrees of the need for an economic development person. And if that person can help bridge that gap with assistant city manager, I think that would be a great addition. And the only other question I had was, I think you had put in the budget for an additional DSO.
We had in last year's budget, there were going to be 2 part-time CSOs.
Okay.
This year, they're full-time CSOs because we knew that the former CSO was going to retire. And he trained his replacement, but he also stayed longer than what we had originally thought he was going to stay. So all of a sudden, with them, we had a full-time and almost 2 full-time.
Right.
Then he retired, and we just went out and hired an emergency CSO to help during Iditarod. Unfortunately, we decided not to keep him on, but we are, right now you have 1 full-time CSO, and the proposal would be to have another full-time CSO.
A full-time one now on a
Because basically,
community service officer, just
Right.
We use terminology CSO, but and that right now we have a full-time person that's
right, we could find someone who would work full-time. We had not been able to find anybody who wanted to work at part-time. So I made a decision, okay, we've got this person on board, going to work 40 hours. We have another person who has expressed interest in coming on board as a part-time CSO. He's been having conversations, the chief off and on, for the last 3 months, it seems. But, we're having trouble finding police officers.
understand.
So, we want to get more feet on the street and obviously present a less confrontational situation with those that are homeless or whatever the situation is. So, and I actually, the chief, you're gonna comment during the public comment section, okay? Because the chief's got something important to tell you.
There are two full-time CSOs in the
In the
proposed
budget.
2023. But I think that if you can find one sooner, that more than likely making some amendments or adjustments to this year's budget would be entertained.
I've heard the message.
Okay.
Well, they probably have some extra salary money in there that was supposed to be for police officers that they have, that they have.
A credit for salaries that we did not expect. We thought we would save because of just getting problems with filling in positions. When we did your first budget amendment in January, we had already met that threshold of savings. And you have savings again in this year's budget. And the way the hiring process is just being dragged out and getting folks, I suspect you'll meet that easily this year again. It's not like we're not trying to hire people. It's just as the mayor has said from the utility standpoint, we're advertising and, a lot of response.
Brown.
Chief's gonna talk to us,
Did Councilmember Johnson or Topcock have any questions for the city manager?
No, I don't have any questions. I'd support a extra CSO and a assistant city manager.
Thank you. Citizens,
No, I don't have anything. Thanks.
we'll move on to then. We're going to push you into wherever you want to be, whether you want to be under the city manager's report or the public comment. Or
As long as I get to stand
right
on the
now,
podium, I'm good.
please come on up.
Okay.
Our city manager.
Councilman, police chief of Nome, and I want to say that I feel very fortunate that I'm able to be the police chief of Nome. When I first took over, there were some big hurdles set in front of me, but I knew that we could get past that by the hiring of good people. It's hard to get the right person, but putting the wrong person in here would create more problems. Selective, and that's what I wanted to say about that. But I have two people that are really I'm honored to work with. One of them is Sharon Sparks, our victim advocate, and the other is Bill Crockett, which is and somebody of his caliber, as well as Sharon Sparks. She brings so much skill to the profession. It is a very hard thing to do. Just a little background on Will. He was a Portland, Oregon policeman, and he was on the road for 6 years. And at that point, investigations, which he finished the last 21 years of his career. The last 6 years were working sex crimes. So that happens to be, of course, one of our big problems. I must say it's been his skill level is exemplary. I have to say he's one of the best detectives I ever worked with. Been around for 36 years in police work. So, some recent news that he had 31 or 13 indictments on another individual. And first investigation that I just mentioned spanned back 50 years. And to me, we can have investigators clear cases, but I know Will works for the victims, and with Sharon Sparks there, it's just a natural combination. And Will would not be as successful as he is if it wasn't for Sharon. When they go and they interview a victim, they have to actually relive that tragic episode with the victim. And it's very hard on an investigator. It's really hard on Sharon, but nation just last week. And I know that, you know, we don't always have the positive press, but I just want to make sure that the citizens know that we're working very hard at the police department. That's what I have to say. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Chief, and why don't you bring them in to see us, please?
Yeah, I was gonna suggest that too, these accommodations, it'd be nice to do it right here during city council meetings.
We were gonna do that, but we, you know, right now, last time when the chief and I met, and we'll meet tomorrow, we were we're on target for 60 to 65 assaults, you know.
Currently, we have 25 cases that have been called in this year, and of which 14 are active.
You know, and obviously this was a legitimate criticism before when the chief and I came in together as he was acting and I was the new city manager. We're looking at all this backlog of cases and where we were going to get through them. And, you know, we've been lucky with some really key people that have been here. I wish could stay here, but other opportunities presented itself. But, you know, if frankly, 50 to 65 cases is too many, and especially for a community this size. But the interesting thing is how many people the department have gotten off the streets the last year, which you sometimes don't hear about, that were serial abusers. And it's been the work of the police department that has gotten those people off the street. And we just don't sometimes hear about it. But that's why I wanted to make sure that, yes, we still don't like the number of sexual abuse cases, but we're doing everything we can to mitigate it or to let people know if we catch you, you're going to do time ultimately. So congratulations to the chief. The entire department was involved with one of these cases almost. And, you know, these are the cases that are the real morale boosters in an organization. You know, even as horrible as the crime is.
To let you know, I can't really comment on the cases because they are still active. However, I can say that in the last case alone, there was 8 victims, spanned back generations, and you know, it's just like I said, it's just closure to a lot of these folks. They're just first, they're very angry because it wasn't addressed right away. I can't change the past, but I can certainly do something about the future.
Appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you.
We'll move on then to citizens' comments or members of the public who would like to address the council this evening. Move on to council member comments. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Henderson.
I wanted to thank the NJUS board. They accommodated me at one of the recent board meeting where I talked about the housing incentive program and my idea of including utility credits in there. I appreciate them listening. I also appreciated the feedback that I got. And some of the feedback that I got was that You know, the NJUS operates on a pretty lean budget, and their idea is to try to conserve every amount of money and to keep rates lower for the community, which I think is very commendable. And so I have reconsidered my idea about asking the utility to fund credits in conjunction with the property exemption for creation of new residential housing. In its place, however, I'm going to be asking the council when we pass this ordinance to fund a fund in order so that the city can reimburse the utilities for these credits, so that it's not reflected in the NJUS budget and potentially reflects utility rates. And I'm going to be asking the council to consider funding an equivalent the city has spent to date on the municipal employee housing project, which I think is around $300,000 to date, to fund that, to fund the payment of utility credits in conjunction with the property exemption. So I don't want to get into a lot of details, but I respect the utilities position in terms of trying to keep a lean budget that doesn't affect any other ratepayers. I want to thank Nikki for her very thorough budget reports, and I really appreciate you waiting at the end of every page so I can ask questions. So I really appreciate the thoroughness of her reports and sort of the understanding of a lot of the details. I want to recognize, and I hope I don't embarrass her, but Diana with the Nome Nugget. She was the award that the Alaska Press Club for the best small newspaper in Alaska. And I'm not a journalist, but I understand that's a pretty prestigious thing in the journalism community. So to have a local homegrown paper get that award, I think is really cool. So congratulations to Diana and her staff. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Very nice, thank you.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
I guess I'd like to thank Will and Sharon for their outstanding service to community and Sharon's continuing outstanding service. I also like to thank Mike for pointing it out so people know that that's going on. Just makes us a better place. Let me see, sound issues. Tonight on Teams, it was pretty good. There was a few dropouts and a couple freezes, but as a matter of fact, you're frozen at the moment. I also got a word from a couple of people that the sound on YouTube was reasonable tonight. It's only a few dropouts. That's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
So our local radio station, KNOM, plays excerpts once in a while from 100 years ago from when city council meets. And ironically, I must have been in the car a few times on Friday, or because it seemed like I heard it over and over again, but it was talking about council members moving the meeting along and not to just talk for the sake of creating hot air. And so with that, I don't have very many comments. But I do appreciate that we are kind of blessed with a local radio station that does keep up on news and a local newspaper, because not all rural communities have that, and it's good for the public to be able to have a venue in order to hear what's going on. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Topcock.
I don't have any comments tonight, thanks.
The discussion on the property tax exemption stuff at the work session. I'll forego any comments on that tonight. I am happy to hear the progress that the police department has made. I think that's critical thing to regaining trust in the community. That's enough hot air for me.
No comments. Thank you.
Okay, just a couple of things, meetings that we have coming up, tomorrow at 5:30. We'll be meeting as the Board of Equalization to, continue to deliberate on, 6 appeals, that were before the board, from North Sound Health Corporation. 16th, we have our next budget work session at 5:30, and the following day, on the 17th, housing incentives work session, at which time we'll have our attorney. Again, just encourage people to get involved in the community cleanup and also in the e-waste program. The great thing there, collecting all of that, the e-waste, old computers and the like, and shipping those out for refurbishment. Also, the last word from the school is that anybody can go to graduation. Depending on what happens with COVID, I guess that could still change, but presently there are no restrictions, and the public is invited without, just ask that you safety precautions that you feel are right for you. I'd like to ask for your concurrence on the reappointment of Russell Rowe to seat E on the Port Commission. Russell's done a great job during this term, is quite engaged in the activities, and I believe he should be continuing, so.
Point, Road to CE of the Nome Port Commission.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Councilmember Mark Johnson, roll call, please.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson.
Yes.
EE.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And is this legit on the, that we're having an executive session?
Yes, just for 5 minutes.
Okay. Motion then to resend us into executive session on legal matters, the immediate knowledge of which may have adverse impacts on city of Nome finance.
So moved.
Councilmember Brown, Councilmember Henderson, no objection. Or no roll call, we're in recess, thank you.
Didn't mean to disengage too early.
I saw your finger go up there, so, as I was